everybody, and welcome to Talks at Google at the Cambridge office. Today we are very fortunate to have Dan Lyons here to talk about his book, Disrupted, My Misadventure in the Startup Bubble. Dan's had a ton of jobs throughout his life, including technology editor at Newsweek, creator of the blog The Secret Life of Steve Jobs, which many of you have read, and the co-producer and writer for HBO's Silicon Valley. This book actually focuses on his most recent misadventure as a marketing fellow at HubSpot, a Boston startup. Please join me in welcoming Dan Lyons.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm amazed that you all are here, but thank you. I want to tell you, first of all, that I'm a huge Android fan, and I want to thank anybody here who works on Android. I love Android. I think it's, despite all the BS we hear about people changing the world, like, I actually think Android is a product that changed the world and is still changing the world, and I really believe in it. And I know that sounds stupid and kooky, like I drank the Kool-Aid and I don't even work here, but it is. I think it's a remarkable product, and I thank you all for it every day, and also everything else. I built my whole life around Google products. I realized at some point I have Gmail, Google Docs. I mean, I think the last 10 years of my life, I don't know how many years of my life are all in Google Docs. I mean, everything. I use your calendar. Basically, my whole life is built around stuff you guys make, and I really appreciate it. And I know also that it's not easy. Not that I would have any clue how to make anything you make, but I'm sure it involves lots and lots of hard work to make even a small thing work for so many people. And what?
And the first one's free.
And the first one's free. But I don't really have prepared remarks. I can tell you a little about myself and answer any questions you have about the book. But in short, I was a technology journalist for a long time. I still kind of am. I still once in a while write a story. And I loved being a journalist, and I still do. I just loved being a journalist. It was, for me, probably what your jobs feel like to you. Like, just I get up every day and I get to meet fascinating, interesting, amazing people and ask them questions, and they actually answer them. So I met Andy Rubin once. Is how I became a big Android fan. I did a cover story in Newsweek about Android, and I was like, I can't believe I get to meet Andy Rubin. You know, it's like, blew my mind. You know, I went out to Mountain View and all the other guys on his team, and it was like that all the time, right? Meeting fascinating, interesting people from across all fields. I ended up at Newsweek. I was they called it technology editor, but I was really just a writer. Newsweek went through a few changes, and as you know, the media business was stressed and under trouble. So I ended up getting laid off in 2012, and suddenly looked around and realized I was 50 years old or 51, and not only was out of a job and working in a company that was downsizing, I looked around and the entire industry I was in was blowing up, you know. And I did the thing you do, you call all your friends, and a bunch of guys from Newsweek had bailed out to Time, and I thought, oh, I'll just call and go to Time. And they were like, no, we got nothing. And then Forbes, where I had worked for 10 years before Newsweek, had been trying to poach me while I was at Newsweek, and I kept saying, no, I don't want to go back to Forbes. So now, of course, I'd love to go back to Forbes. So I called them up, and they said, oh, God, yeah, man, dude, oh, yeah, we'd love it when people come back. Come on down. And then when I got there, it was like, well, we don't know, we don't have any jobs, but we can give you like a contract, and you can do 8 stories a year for us. And I was like, oh, okay. And it'll pay $32,000 with no benefits. And I was like, oh, shit, like, this is way worse than I thought, right? Like, this is much more dire than I thought. So suddenly I was like, you know, kind of scrambling. I ended up going to run a tech blog in San Francisco called Read Write, and I was commuting back and forth from Boston, where I've always lived in Boston, and that was a grind, and it kind of was sort of for me like the last straw for media, because I thought, if this is what media jobs have become, like, I don't think I can do this. And it's because it's really about spinning that hamster wheel and traffic and catchy headlines, and you don't ever have time to really do a good story or meet people. It wasn't really what I got into journalism to do, or what appealed to me about journalism in the beginning in college. So I ended up starting to think, well, I'll go try to work in the tech industry and get in a startup, and that'll be fun, and I'll go for that ride. And when you're a tech journalist, covering ththese places like Google, you always feel like a kid with your nose pressed against the glass, like looking into the candy store, and it looks so cool, you know. And I think, I've never done a scientific poll, so I have no data to back this up, but I think everybody I know, all my friends are tech journalists, I think all of them at one point or another have thought about it or interviewed or tried to get a job, or at least wondered what it would be like to, it's sort of like if you're a sports writer and you're covering baseball, and you really wonder what it would be like to play on a sports team, you know? And it seems like it would be more fulfilling than just writing about it. So the difference being that, you know, you don't have any chance of playing baseball. You'll never be able to play at that level. But in tech companies, there are still roles that, like, a journalist in theory is sort of semi-qualified for, like PR or blogging. I mean, we're not really well trained for anything, and we're not really housebroken. I literally had a recruiter talking to me at one point when I was trying to cross over to corporate jobs, and she said, well, nobody's going to want to talk to you. And I did that fake Steve Jobs blog, which was like really a bullet in the head, right? So, and she's like, well, you're not housebroken. And I like that was really the word she used. And I was like, really? And she's like, yeah, nobody wants a journalist. You guys are all obnoxious. You're rude, and you know, you don't have any manners, and so no, it's going to be really tough. But long story short, I ended up going to work at HubSpot, which is here in Cambridge. So I didn't have to move and out to the Valley, and I kind of didn't want to move to the Valley, and it didn't go well. So the long story short, save yourself the time. The recruiter was right. You know, like, yeah, it's like totally right. Like, it didn't go well, and it was largely my fault, right? And it was essentially the inability to keep my mouth shut. So exactly like, you know, very predictable consequences. And there were other issues that came up while I was there. I was twice the age of the average employee. And not by accident. In terms of the company really wanted to build a culture around very young people, and had set up a culture to specifically to appeal to young workers. And I was there about 6 months, 9 months, and wondering, like, what's wrong? Like, what, you know, this just isn't working out. And one day the CEO gave an interview in the Times, which for a little company like that is a big deal. And in it he said, well, we're trying to build a culture specifically to attract and retain Gen Yers, you know, because in tech, things move so fast, and gray hair and experience, they're really overrated. Really, you know, no value there. And I kind of gasped, right? Like, I kind of was, seriously, because I first thought, like, hey, do people really believe that? Because, yeah, and then the second beat was, even if you believe it, would you be stupid enough to say it in the paper, right? Like, I mean, I wrote a piece in LinkedIn this week, and I said it's akin to saying, like, well, we really like to hire, you know, heterosexuals or white people, because white people, they're good at tech. We like those white people, you know, like, even if you think it, you wouldn't say it, right? But but in this case, because and the lesson I learned was age bias was different. You can't say that about race, gender, sexual orientation. But with age, it's like in the Valley, everybody's like, yeah, no, that's totally true. Yeah, it's totally true. Yeah, old people suck. And I was like, I was flabbergasted by this, right? That it was just open, right? And that sort of was the beginning of the end for me, because I mouthed off about it on Facebook and got in all sorts of trouble about that. But the other thing that occurred to me about age was that I don't know, well, two things. I don't know if there's any other industry other than professional sports where people just accept that at 35 or 40, you know, you should expect then you're winding down. You're 40. Like, I mean, I think that's insane, right? Like, I actually think I'm 55 now. I think I'm better at what I do slightly than I was when I was 35. But my sister-in-law is a surgeon at Stanford. She's a colorectal surgeon. She's 40 years old, and she basically just started her career because she did med school, a residency, a fellowship. She spent years and years having to learn first all the basics of colorectal surgery, and now she uses robotic surgery from I think it's Da Vinci, and they're very complicated machines, and it's very important work, and it's very intellectually demanding, and it's also very physically demanding. You're on your feet, and it requires a certain amount of dexterity and skill, and you just can't do this like without years of training and years of kind of. I was talking to her. I visited her a couple weeks ago, and years of really arduous training where you make mistakes, and the mistakes you make sometimes kill people or cause them to suffer or not to, and you have to, and the only way we can train new surgeons is to put people through this ringer, and they're talking a lot in that industry, or that industry, but among surgeons, they talk about grit and resilience being now the key markers of success, not really necessarily huge intellect, although there's certainly a lot of intellect required. So it struck me, like, imagine if you told surgeons, well, okay, 45, you just can't operate anymore. I mean, and I don't buy this idea that they say in tech that tech is somehow unique and different and so special and moves so fast that older people just can't keep up, because older people keep up in the law, they keep up in medicine. There are surgeons who are operating late. I mean, I know airline pilots, they make them stop flying at a certain point. But anyway, so I found that idea kind of flabbergasting, and I wanted to write about it. The other idea that I found astounding was that I really love the tech industry. I've spent my whole life covering it, and I don't think you could cover something that you hated, right? Like you could, but it would be a miserable life. But I mean, I genuinely, as a journalist, get excited and got excited going on stories. I went to Lawrence Livermore and met the guys who were trying to do fusion energy, which may or may not ever work, but to me it's like, you guys are insane. Like, it's so amazing. Like, you would take on something so big. Or I went to CERN to the collider, and again, it's like, you can't believe human beings will harness themselves to these enormous endeavors and try to make it work. Or the supercomputing people at Livermore, I did another story on. And so you end up having this, deep love and appreciation for this industry and all the good things it gives to the world. And then it occurred to me that this industry that's so great in so many ways is also probably the least diverse industry on Earth, and is kind of like a little bit apologetic for it, but is also sort of proud of it. And I found that strange, and I found like that was something worth wrestling with in a book. This makes it sound like my book is really depressing and serious, where it isn't. It's really a comedy, right? So the original idea for my book was, I worked in this environment. It was a very kooky startup where they want to be Google, but they can't quite get it right. So it's all Google but off. But they're HubSpot-y instead of Google-y, and what's it mean to be HubSpot-y, and this and that. And there's a way of looking at the world, and we're on this big mission. But we sell email spam, right? But it was like, well, we're changing the world, and we don't sell email spam. We sell anti-spam, and it's lovable marketing content. And there's a lot of euphemisms, a lot of jargon. But so I originally set out to write a modern-day Office Space, like the Mike Judge movie, only set in 2016 at this startup, and the eyes-in character is the old guy who comes in and he's just failing and struggling, and people look at you like you're a ghost, Like, there was one guy older than me at the company, and then everybody else way, 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 way younger. Like, I would hang out with 35-year-olds because those were the old people, and it's like the closest I could get. So I thought that would be a funny book. And as I started writing it, though, I started wrestling with this idea of, well, why is it like that? Why are these companies playgrounds, and why do they have all this bread and circus and ping pong tables and parties and this? It was more of a frat house culture than I think what you guys have here. But a lot of the new startups, I think, are very frat bro culture. And why does that exist? And how did that happen? And I started trying to unravel that and get at business models. And so the middle part of the book is the boring part. You should just skip. Those are the chapters where all this comes up. You can read the beginning and the end. And but no. So I started a book that started off trying to be funny and just a comedy ended up becoming, I hope, having a little insight in the middle. So that said, I would be happy to talk to you about those issues in the book, or about Fake Steve. I think there's still some people who remember the Fake Steve Jobs thing, and that was a kind of a funny. I had to go to give a talk. My last book was a Fake Steve book, and when it came out, I went to Google Mountain View, and it was an interesting conversation because I had done a lot of jokes about Eric Schmidt and Larry and Sergey and stuff. Or I can talk a little bit about Silicon Valley. I'm a very, very minor guy. Oh, I forgot that part of the story. While I was at HubSpot and really, really not going well, and I thought, okay, I'll stay 1 year. I'd started in April. I'll stay till next April, and I'll kind of find a way to kind of ease out. Like, I knew about the holidays, like, this isn't working, but nobody's hiring in the holidays, so I'll just get through Christmas and New Year's, and I'll do some skiing, and then about April it'll be about a year, and I can, go away and no one will know. And or they call it graduation. You could graduate, and sometimes it's a forcible graduation. Sometimes it's your own choice. But there's always a celebratory email. Some guy gets fired, and it'll be like, Derek just graduated, and we all wish him best of luck with his superpowers on his new super adventure. And it's like, great, you just fired that guy, Like, it's okay. You can just say we hated him. He sucks. He's out. But one woman got fired after 4.5 years of doing a lot of different jobs, and she was an accomplished woman. She's 35. She'd done a lot of good things, and they just told her boss just said, "Well, your job doesn't exist anymore." It's like at Newsweek, I could see that, right? Okay, that was bullshit there too, by the way. In the same conversation, the Newsweek woman said to me, "They just want to take your salary and hire 5 kids out of college." And I was like, "Okay, that's real. I get that, you know." But this place was growing, but for some reason, I don't know if she pissed somebody off, she did something wrong, whatever. Just 4.5 years in, you have 2 weeks. You can interview for other jobs inside or just get out. And she couldn't, of course, no one else is going to hire her inside because now she's pariah, right? She's got the mark of the beast on her. So, so she leaves. But on her last day, they had a graduation party. And she was like having panic attacks. She was in her car crying, like, "I don't get this. Like, why are they fucking with me? You know, like, why are they doing this to me?" And I was like, "I don't know. This is like a serious, like, mind screw, you know?" Total rant. So in the middle of this, sorry. So I'm waiting till April. They send me to a conference in Salt Lake City to, it was like the Adobe Digital Marketing Summit. And if you want to ever be in a ring of hell, go to the Adobe Digital Marketing Summit. Like, it is, some of you probably work in digital marketing, right? So it's okay, I'm sorry. And it was like, it was crazy, and I'm walking around, and at one point it's in the Salt Lake City Convention Center, and it's like a 2-level place with this big sort of atrium with a ring around it, and I was walking around looking down thinking, if I throw myself off this, would I die, or would I be, you know, just turned into a vegetable? Would I be paralyzed for life? Because I don't want to be a vegetable, but if I knew I was going to die, I probably would just throw myself off this bridge right now. And literally I'm walking around, and I get this call, and it's an agent in Hollywood who, at the agency where I signed with back when Fake Steve Jobs got developed into a TV show. I sold a cable show based on that, and I wrote a bunch of scripts and sold it to a cable network, and then it never got made. But the scripts were floating around, and I had met a lot of people out there. And then a few years later, Silicon Valley got picked up by HBO, and literally this guy says, Silicon Valley is about to start airing, and if they get renewed, they don't know, but if they get renewed, would you want to come out to Hollywood and work on a TV show? And I was like, if you knew where I was right now, like I'm like in the Salt Lake City Convention Center. I'm watching like 2 rows of schmucks going up and getting food out of, you know, those steamer trays or like the meat you don't know what it is and the gravy. And I was like, dude, yes, I don't care how much money it is, free, I'll do it, I'm done. You know, I'll pay you. You know, really, seriously, I will pay you. And so they did get renewed, and I thought, great, there's my way out. I just give my notice, and you know, it's only 14 weeks, but I'll find something else on the back end, and that'll be great. And then the company said, no, we'd like it to give you a leave of absence, and so we can say that one of our guys is working on this show. Like, they saw some publicity opportunity in it. Like, we really had to have a meeting so where we can talk about how we can drive value from your job at HBO. I was like, what? Anyway, so, and that really you can't, you know what I mean? Well, can our CEO have a cameo? Can you plug our product on the show? I was like, no, we can't do that. Like, and me, of all people, like, I'm like the peon of the peons, you know? So I went on a leave of absence, and I should never have come back, but I did, and then it got really unpleasant, and I lasted just a couple months, and I left. And then I did go back last season for another summer of writing on the show, and I don't know if I'll ever go back again. I don't know if I'll be asked back. It's like every year, you don't know. But one other interesting thing is last year, Dick Costolo left Twitter. And I don't know if you know this, but he did comedy before he was a business guy. He was a stand-up guy, and he made, he was in a pair with another guy, and they did some comedy act. So he happened to meet them, I guess, and said, I would love to work on the show. So one day I went into work on a Monday, and there was only one chair left at this big table, so I sat down, and I looked, and I'm like, that's Dick Costolo. Like, I had never met him before. I was like, and he's talking, and at lunch, he got lunch, and I said, oh, are you sticking around for the whole day? Because usually guests just come in for half day and leave. He's like, no, I'm working here now. And I'm like, whoa, okay, I'm working with Dick Costolo. This is awesome, right? And he was really, really funny, and really smart and clever, like a really nice guy. And it was just the weirdest experience ever. So that is sort of the end of, I guess, what I could tell you about my little bio and my little story. But if you have any questions, I'm supposed to talk a little more, but it's 2:30. We can just have questions if you want to ask about the show or about Fake Steve or about, God forbid, the book. I'm happy to talk, answer any, or have a conversation, yeah.
I haven't read the book yet, but I think I have a relevant question. So, in order to get people motivated, you like to give them these big goals, like the Hadron Collider and so on and so forth. And you talk to them about the big goals, and you present them. We have our weekly meetings, our TGIFs, where we see the great stuff that Google is doing. On the other hand, 60,000 people, some of them are doing really repetitive, boring tasks. And so the question is, to what extent is it a good thing to be creating the illusion, if you like, or the view that everyone's important, everyone's doing something important, we're all doing great stuff? It's an illusion. But it's all the opposite is a sort of cynicism that you don't want to get into either. And so it reminds me of the anecdote of the guy who visits the Kennedy Spacecraft Center, whatever it's called, Cape Canaveral, and asks the janitor what his job is. And he says, "We're sending a man to the moon," right? The janitor is saying this.
Yeah.
So, how do you balance this illusion building and euphemisms? And I mean, you talk about digital marketing and email spam and so on. I'm sure they didn't call email spam internally.
No, lovable marketing content.
Exactly.
That was it.
What's the right balance? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I'm sure that's what companies wrestle with, and I'm sure that's why a lot of the rhetoric and those euphemisms exist, right? Because nobody wants to call it what it is. In some cases, I don't know. I think there was a time when you could just say, I have a job and I go to work and I do my job and I get paid and I go home, right? I mean, for most people, they weren't required that their life have a big mission. But somehow that's become a thing now, right? That everybody has to feel that they're on a mission. It may, I don't know, maybe you just do what companies do and say that. I have a question. When you do the TGI Fridays, does everybody in the satellite offices tune in? Does everybody go to a room and watch it? Or you watch it at your desk?
Next day.
Oh, it's taped and you just watch it the next day?
There is a live stream.
Oh, because it's late in the day, West Coast time. What time is it at 5?
7:30 here.
Oh, okay. And you guys aren't here at 7:30 on Friday? Do they know that? Yeah. No, so I always wondered that, and they shifted it at one point to a different time so that. Oh, it's on Thursday nights now at 4:30. Oh, okay. So you watch it on Friday when you come into the office. But do people get together in this office and watch it as a group? Oh, they do. And here, oh, it's in this room. So about this many people would be watching. Yeah. No. Okay. I've just always wondered that, and I don't know. I don't know how you get people to motivated to work like that. I just think there's a certain amount of dishonesty or of foolishness that I found to it. I think, again, I'm super naive. I sort of think of Google as a place that legitimately is doing big things, or at least trying to do big things. I still love the balloon with the Wi-Fi thing. Is that floating around anywhere? It is, right? I mean, that's right. They're using it, right? I mean, it's cool. So I always felt like if you were at a place where, like, if you were at NASA and the ultimate goal was to put a guy on the moon, even if your role was small, and then you could still be proud of that. My dad spent his whole life at divisions of AT&T. And I remember him telling me, and there's a big factory in Massachusetts where I grew up in North Andover, and he, for a while, was running one of the shop floors. And the job literally was, I think they were before circuit boards, and they would actually hand wire boards. They would and I remember thinking, that's gotta be the worst work. And it was basically assembly line work, and I don't think anybody dressed it up as like, we're changing the way people communicate. It's like, no, you're making phone crap, But it paid well, and there was overtime, and people were happy to do that work for the paycheck. It was considered, where I grew up, a really good place to get a job. It was a secure job, and it paid well. But it's a long way of saying I don't know. I'm sorry. There's this when in doubt, just bullshit, right? So I know. No, I mean, I don't know. I think companies struggle with it. I'm taken aback by it. I think it started with rhetoric, with Facebook, where they were like changing the world. And I guess in a way, like now I sort of think they have. I used to think they were ridiculous, that it was just the biggest time waste in the world, Facebook, and now I find I spend all day on it. But yeah, I think everybody saw that, and it's maybe almost something that investors expect a startup to be able to say, we're disrupting X, Y, and Z industry, and it's $1 trillion industry, we're gonna have this much of it, and we're changing the world. But And that phrase, we use that a lot in Silicon Valley. We make fun of that a lot. But, you know, some companies really are, right? I think Tesla is really changing the world. I would probably love to be a peon at Tesla. I think that would be, you know, pretty cool. I'd love to be a peon at Google too, if any of you, you know, no one will ever hire me again. But no, I mean, I think like to have a small role at a big place doing important work would be cool, would be interesting. Like the old Bell Labs. I visited those guys a few times, and I thought, like, man, to be even a tiny part of this must be very, very cool. You know, it must be meaningful. But I don't know. Maybe day to day it isn't. I don't know. Sorry. Go ahead.
I think your comments on the youth culture and technology are interesting and true.
Thank you.
One of the things I've wondered about that, though, is if things go well, young people turn into old people. And I'm wondering what...
Yeah, right, exactly. If things go well. I like that you preface that. Yeah.
And I really wonder what the people who are enforcing youth culture think they're going to do when they're 45 or 50.
Right.
35 is the case, maybe.
I had a call. I wrote this thing on LinkedIn this week that's gone crazy. I've had like more than 1,000 comments about age, and it really struck a nerve. But I got an email from a guy in San Francisco. Now he's not technical, but he works in tech as sort of a writer, blogger kind of guy. He's 32, and he said, "I'm already freaking out. Like I'm too old because the people right out of college are way younger than me, and I feel like I'm getting aged out at 32, right? The other thing I always think about is, you know, the famous Mark Zuckerberg quote when he was like 20, he got up on stage and said, young people are just smarter. And I wonder if he's going to feel that way when he's 40 and 50, right? You know, maybe. It may be that they want to hire young people for certain reasons other than the fact that they themselves are young. But I do wonder if that attitude will change as these companies grow up and mature, right? I have the same fear. Like, and then you feel like somebody, because a lot of people don't like this book. There was an excerpt in Fortune, and it's kind of making fun of the culture. It's a pretty funny excerpt, but a lot of people didn't like it. And one guy said, here's my review of the book, and it's a picture of Grandpa Simpson, and it says, old man yells at cloud, you know, like, and I get it, like, you know, you feel like you're the old guy ranting around, like, these kids these days, and it's like, no, I mean, I think, you know, people of all ages are capable of doing great things, and I just don't, it's the reverse that I think, like, after 40, somehow you're useless, and I wonder, when they get to be 40, are they all buying into a worldview that says, you know, yeah, your career is only gonna, don't worry about it, when you turn 30, you'll deal with it then, but like, how, right? I don't know. That is one of the big problems. You're a millennial.
Not quite. Thank you.
Oh, really? Okay, thank you. Sir, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I haven't read the book yet either, and maybe this is, I'm just asking you to talk about what's in the middle chapters, but you kind of implied, I think, that the sort of frat culture of a lot of startups contributes to and reinforces the lack of diversity. And how do you unpack and reverse that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I do think those are related, that the frat bro culture is, and this idea of culture fit. When I interviewed at HubSpot, that was one of the first things I said, like, we like culture fit, someone we want to go have a beer with. That's what I want to hire, people I want to have a beer with, which is sort of the euphemism for people who are just like me. So it actually creates a lack of diversity, right? It's the opposite of diversity. It's a uniformity. It's a filter bubble, right? And I think the only way it gets reversed is because right now Silicon Valley will pay lip service to diversity, at least when it comes to race and gender. They don't really do much about it, but every year the reports come out. Apple, Google, Facebook put out their diversity numbers. I did a search for this, and the headlines all show, new report shows little progress. Next year, news report shows little progress. So I think this is incredibly cynical. And I don't think it applies to Google, but I think maybe a lot of these startups that are very bro-like cultures, I think if you gave the bros a shot of truth serum and they said what they really thought, they would say, yeah, we have to say that stuff because, but they believe in their minds that the optimal arrangement is a bunch of bros working in a company who think the same way, and then that gives them energy. And I think they actually think this is the optimal arrangement. We're going to get the best financial payoff if we do it this way. Anything we do about diversity will slow us down, will make us less nimble. It's just an impediment. And yeah, we'll do as little of it as we can to get by. But we won't really do it. We don't really believe it'll work. And I think the only way for change to come is for these guys to become convinced that it's actually in their economic interest, that it actually makes a company better and stronger, that it's smart business, not just a nice thing to do. Because I think the ultimate cynical response from Silicon Valley is like, we're not in the business of being nice. I'm not in the business of trying to help you or help women or help this. No, you take care of yourself. It's a meritocracy out here, and I'm in the business to make as much money as I can. I'm going to do whatever I can to make the most money in the least possible time. I actually think that's the problem. And I think they have the wrong-headed idea that lack of diversity equals success financially. Sorry.
Oh, so not to distract from the book, but in your experience as a technology writer and the things you've covered, is there anything that stands out as being particularly bizarre or foolhardy or brilliant and successful?
You mean of things that I covered and wrote about?
Yeah.
Well, I wrote about the first dot-com bubble. I was at Forbes at the time, and I remember it lasted so long, or it seemed to at the time, that I started to doubt myself. I started thinking, maybe these guys are right. Maybe, gravity, the laws of gravity don't apply anymore. Maybe the markets have changed, economics have changed, trees grow to the sky. I remember this moment where I thought, like, I'm the wrong one. Like, again, all of us are sort of cynical on the outside, saying this is ridiculous. But that was a fun period. Ironically, looking back on that period now, it was a great time for magazines because all those companies raised lots and lots of money, and they bought Sun Computers, Oracle database, routers from Cisco, and EMC storage. That's where they spent all their money, and then they bought ads for hype. So we got all the ad money. And so we all thought in the media business, this is great. Business is booming. So I think we were all very foolish in those days. And it's hard not to be foolish when you're benefiting from the foolishness, right? You're having a great time. But I wrote about a lot of things and met a lot of people that I thought were really interesting and doing amazing, amazing things. I always felt, for example, Microsoft was a much better company than they got credit for. I think Ballmer made a lot of mistakes and he missed a lot of things, but boy, they've built this, enterprise business that's really phenomenal. And just the people I met at Microsoft over the years were always, really, really nice, smart, dedicated people. Mostly, engineers especially were always the best. You very rarely get to meet real engineers when you're a journalist. You're very much kept on the outside, and you get brought in and given a canned thing, and the person's been media trained. So you realize you're always kind of working from a script that the company has written. But when you can meet real engineers, they're the best. They're always like great people, very cynical. You know what I mean? They're a lot like journalists in some ways. They're really kind of wise asses and great sense of humor. And I always loved that Microsoft had this engineering culture, especially in the early days. And the same thing at Google. The best thing about being a tech journalist, and probably a lot of you have worked at different places. You work in the tech industry. There's a lot of amazing, really cool, really nice people who are just fantastic to meet. So that was the best thing about it. I met friends that I've been in touch with, like a PR guy that I met on a story, and we became friends for the last. I was just trading email today with a woman who did PR at Dell in ¡99, and we got to be friends, and we're still friends, and she doesn't work in tech anymore, but just really, really fantastic people. I'm sorry, do you have a question?
Don't mean to stop you. I love the fake Steve Jobs. I was wondering if there's things that happened since that ended that you really wanted to write about or talk about in that voice.
Yeah, not so much lately, but there was a time when I really missed it. It was very addictive for me doing that blog. And there were a lot of times along the way early on when I really thought I should stop because I thought this is disastrous. And I would find like I couldn't. Like then something would happen and be like, oh, and there was a time when I thought, I stopped when Steve got really sick because I was actually a big Apple fan, I find the cultiness and the weird mind control stuff hilarious. Same thing at HubSpot. Like I find it hilariously funny, right? But I loved the products and I admired him. So after he died, though, there was a time when I really thought about bringing him back as dead Steve Jobs, and it was just terrible, right? It's so wrong, right? And it either gets a laugh or people like that woman covering her face. It's like, oh shit, right? Like there's a couple people really not looking happy now. Sorry, and I didn't mean it in a disrespectful way, but I had this idea in the fake Steve Jobs blog. He was sitting in the lotus position with a bong and a MacBook. And I actually had an artist do a version of that, only he had wings and he was on a cloud and he had a harp and a MacBook, right? And it was going to be, and the idea was he's gone to heaven, right? And he's in the afterlife. And he's really pissed because he got taken too early. And he's also really pissed because he hates all the stuff Tim Cook is doing, right? And I thought it could be really cool to have him up there going, no, 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 not the watch, not the watch, you know, or that's never going to work. No one's going to buy it, you know, or whatever. I just thought Apple in some ways has changed without him. And I thought that could be funny. I even thought there could be a TV show, not about Steve Jobs, but about that idea. Like, you never see the movie, it's with Albert Brooks and Meryl Streep, where they, what is it, Defending Your Life? Yeah. And it's set in the afterlife, and they die, and they go to a place that's a lot like Google. It's really beautiful and perfect, and everything's calm, and there's food, and it's wonderful. They land in the Googleplex, right? And before you can get to heaven, you have to go in and, like in a courtroom, and defend all of the shitty things you did in your life that you thought no one saw, but they saw because they have video of everything, right? But there's never been a TV show where the guy is in the afterlife. I thought that could be you could do a TV show where it's a CEO gets hit by a bus one day, you know? Or make it more like Ari Gold in Entourage, like kind of a intense character. And he gets whacked, hit by a bus, and bam, he's dead, he's in the afterlife. And his company that he loves, that he, you know, and he wasn't ready to leave it, he has to watch someone else screw it up, right? And I thought that could be a fun show. Half of it's set in the afterworld. He's meeting other famous dead people, you know, who turn out to be jerks, you know, or whatever, you know. Gandhi turns out to be a real prick, you know, whatever. You can have stuff like that. And then he could even appear to Tim Cook, like, in dreams or in his room. Like, people, I had one idea where Bill Gates is in, like, Dubai, in a room. He's got security. He thinks he's safe. And he wakes up in the morning and dead Steve is sitting in the corner in the chair just looking at him. He's like, oh, Jesus, you know. And then Steve is there to have a reckoning with Bill Gates. But I literally pitched this and got exactly this response. Like, no, we're not making a show about a dead guy who appears to people. Like, no. But, and yet, even now, as I pitch it to you, I still believe in it, right? Like, I still want to make that show. I mean, so yeah, I did have this yearning. It was hard to give it up. It really was. It was very, very hard. And I don't so much anymore. Long answer, sorry. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm curious about the reporting process for this book, because when you're a reporter, people know you're a reporter.
Yeah.
You go to campus, you're wearing a badge. At what point in the process where you're an employee did the light bulb go on, like, okay, I'm doing a book, and the people around me maybe don't know that, and you're like scribbling notes from a meeting? Or was none of that, was it all done afterwards?
It was all done after. I wasn't really taking notes. I mean, I was paying attention, and I take notes as a habit, like in meetings, because I never remember what's in a meeting, so I tend to sit in meetings and just type and type and type, because it's just by force of habit my whole life I've been sitting across from people typing or writing notes. But yeah, that's a good question, and I don't really have, it's not a report. I mean, I did do reporting after I left that wasn't to do with HubSpot, that had to do with calling up people in the industry for a perspective on the bubble or compensation, things, you know, other CEOs or venture capitalists. But yeah, I think of it more as like a memoir of my time there, and you know, I'm remembering things that happened when I was there, that, like a crazy meeting, or like there was an incident with a teddy bear. Yeah, see? This is one of the moments where I knew, like, I don't belong here. So about 3 months in, we got a note saying, you know, they're very good at, like, promoting on social. And they got a note saying the CTO, the founder, has published a new article on LinkedIn Pulse, and we got to all go online and all spam it and all tweet it and get everybody to drive traffic to that blog, that post, right? And my feeling is, like, if a post is good, it will get traffic, and you can't tweet a turd to success, right? Like, you can't, you know, I mean, you can't. You just, I don't believe in it. I don't think that works. And I think if it's a great post, it finds a great piece of content, let's say, call that, will find an audience. And so I kind of find that whole thing ridiculous. But I was like, okay, I'll do it. And I went and looked at the post, though, and the post said, we really believe in solving for the customer. The customer is so important. We want the customer present at every meeting. So we have an empty chair. And we put the empty chair in every management team meeting I have an empty chair, and the empty chair is the customer. And I don't know if they talk to the chair, but we consult the empty chair. But that wasn't enough, so I got a teddy bear, right? And now I bring the teddy bear to meetings, and he had a picture. It was on LinkedIn. Like he was really proud of it, like with the CMO sitting next to a teddy bear, and the teddy bear has a Red Bull, looking all pissed off, right? And he's like, "This is Molly, the teddy bear, and she comes to all of our meetings now." And I'm like, "This is nuts, right? This is crazy, right?" But everybody else around me thinks it's cool. And literally, the guy we sat, screen to screen like this, was a former Googler. He had been here for like just 3 years, like an entry-level ad sale guy, and he was kind of cool. So I leaned around him and I was like, dude, hey, what? And he's like, what? I'm like, did you read that article? And he's like, yeah. And there's like people all around, so you have to be quiet, And I was like, the teddy bear thing, did you read that? He's like, yeah, I thought it was really good. I'm like, you thought that was good? And he's like, yeah. He's like, that's crazy. And he's like, no. Well, startups are really, they're really eccentric and kooky, and that's how we are, man. And I was like, wait a minute. When you were at Google, if Larry Page came out and said that he was bringing a teddy bear to meetings, you're telling me that everybody at Google would just be like, hey, great, that's awesome. Let's just all have teddy bears. He's like, well, no, Google's different, I was like no, because that's insane, right? No matter where you are, carrying a teddy bear to meetings is crazy, right? So what amazed me was not just the teddy bear, but the fact that no one else had a problem with the teddy bear, And it wasn't like we all think it sucks, but we don't dare say anything. It was like they had really bought in, like this is awesome, All I know is in any newsroom I worked in, if the managing editor, and there are managing editors out there who probably would bring a teddy bear to sit in as, this is the reader. Think about what the reader wants, that person would be mocked forever. Like they would be just mocked mercilessly forever. Everybody would get teddy bears, would leave teddy bears in his office, would stab teddy bears. I mean, it's terrible, right? You do horrible things to the guy's teddy bear. You put him in the news like, but nobody did that. It was just the most amazing thing. Anyway. Bad questions. Yes, I'm sorry. So it was more, my point is I was just observing stuff like that, and I remembered that going like, I remember the teddy bear thing, so how do you describe that and make it like a scene so it's funny? Yes?
Kind of segueing back, thank you for writing the Fake Steve blog.
Oh, thank you.
It was a joy, and I was surprised to hear that somebody reacted as if you weren't house trained for writing that. I think it's what you said.
Well, and she meant journalists in general. She just meant companies don't like to hire journalists because you're kind of, yeah.
For those who don't remember it, you were kind of unmasked. You wrote
right.
it in secret for quite a while.
Yeah.
And when you were unmasked, I didn't have the impression that you were doing anything really wrong. It seemed like a subversive kind of journalism, actually.
It had become that.
Yeah. Because I remember certain entries that you had, like talking about meeting with music executives to create iTunes and that kind of stuff. And it seems like you couldn't have written the same way if you had just written an article yourself.
Right. You needed the shift of the character to put that. Yeah. But it came, and it became journalism because I originally started just writing little jokes. I originally started writing it because I wanted to learn how to use Blogger. It didn't have anything to do with content. But I needed something. I tried WordPress. I tried TypePad, and then I wanted to use Blogger. And so I'll just do fake CEO because like Robert Scoble was always writing about how all CEOs should have blogs. Remember the guy at Sun, Jonathan Schwartz, had a CEO blog, which I thought was like the worst idea ever. Like the CEO should have a blog, right? But you can only go so far with like jokes about yoga and stuff with Steve Jobs, right? And then finally I had to have something for him to write about, and I thought, oh, what if he's covering technology? He's like a journalist. He's like pontificating on stuff that's happening, not even in his own place. Like he used to rail about open source because I used to cover open source and I was obsessed with it. And so he would be making fun of those guys, which was not in character for Steve Jobs at all, really. I mean, although he probably had his opinions, right? But yeah, it was a kind of journalism toward the end. In fact, toward the end, there was a really good one. I still am kind of semi-proud of this, where the CEO of AT&T came out and said, something about all these, when the iPhone was fairly new, and he was saying that these iPhone users are using too much data and they're clogging up our network. We're going to find a way to choke them back and, try to, because they're taxing the network, right? And so I had Steve Jobs go on this rant, like, look, like we created this great phone that everybody wants to use. Like this is like, you're the record label, the pressing plant, and someone just gave you Meet the Beatles. And there's so much demand for it, and you're like, God damn it, these people, I wish they would stop listening to this music. Like, I can't keep making these stupid records. Like, build out your network, right? And then I went on this long rant, and it kind of went viral. And then, as a joke, that was on a Friday, it went crazy over the weekend. I thought, oh, I've struck a nerve, time to hit again. So on Monday, I get up and said, Steve Jobs says, well, I'll tell you what, all the engineers here are so pissed, because like we work so hard on the iPhone, and then they're trying to choke it back and make it a worse experience. we've come up with an idea. This Friday at 12 noon Pacific time, everybody get on your iPhone at the same time, do something really data intense, and let's just take down the whole network. Like, we're gonna call it Operation Chokehold, and we're gonna destroy the AT&T network, right? Ha, 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 right? So, this is a true story, right? So, and I'm working at Newsweek at the time, and AT&T, it turns out, is our largest advertiser, but I don't know this, right? I don't know this at all, right? So, so I put this thing out there thinking like it's a joke, I forgot all about it, but then someone starts a thing and they're gonna actually do this, right? And like, next thing I know, people are writing about it, like Operation Chokehold, Friday at noon, this is a thing, and like AT&T starts, you know, I think they issued a statement about it, right? And next thing you know, I swear to God, it's on Wolf Blitzer. Wolf Blitzer, I have a clip of him like, they're calling it Operation Chokehold. Techies are threatening about taking it. All started on this satirical blog. And I'm like, oh shit, like I am in such trouble, right? And I remember saying to people, I don't think it'll work. I don't think you can take down a network if everybody gets on at the same time, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know, you know, maybe it will. Of course, it didn't do anything. But then I started doing stories, because I'm like, okay, fine, let's be pissed about this. So I started looking at how much money they were taking in data revenue. And it was huge, like this. And how much were they spending on CapEx? Like this. So I started writing out saying, you SOBs, like you're making all this money on us, charging us for data, but you won't build out your network to support what we want to do. And then I felt like, I hope we do take down the network, right? So it didn't go down. And Friday in the afternoon, I get this call from my editor at Newsweek. She's like, hey. I'm like, hey, how are you? I haven't talked to you all week. What's going on? She's like, nothing much. How are you? I'm like, oh, not bad. And I said, have you heard about this Operation Chokehold thing by any chance? She's like, oh yes. So apparently AT&T was lighting them up all week, telling them, you know, you got to fire this guy. We're going to pull all our ads. But they said it's not our blog. It's, you know, it's his crazy thing on the side. But that was one where I actually thought. And then AT&T starts putting out press releases. We're building out network here. We're building out network here. We're adding this in Cincinnati. We're building out this. And I was like, okay, so there was a little bit of activism there that maybe did a little tiny bit. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. What does disruption mean to you? You use it in the title of your book, and you apply it to yourself. We hear this word today, you know, in every context of society, and especially technology and society. What does it mean to you? And also, relatedly, in your long life in Massachusetts, in Cambridge, perhaps, have you seen how the dynamics within the companies that you're describing actually affecting or possibly disrupting the communities, you know, regular day-to-day life in, you know, in Cambridge?
I haven't seen that, and I've lived in and around Boston for on and off since the 80s. I mean, I grew up in Massachusetts, right? But I haven't really seen disruption in the community, but I think people who are closer to Cambridge would say that they have. I don't know. But yeah, I thank you for that question, because that was the sort of pun of the title, was that we talk a lot about disruption. When you're a tech journalist, it's one of those words you use so much you try to stop using it, because it's so easy to just say they're disrupting this, they're disrupting that. And we all talk about disruption. And I'm not sure, did it come from Clayton Christensen? Does anybody know? I think it's his, is it from The Innovator's Dilemma? Is that where it comes from? But in my case, it was that my life got disrupted by, oddly enough, in a way, by the internet, right? Newsweek got destroyed by the internet. I mean, the media business got upended or classic disruption, right? Of a monopoly business disrupted by this change. So I wanted it just to be a pun, or a double meaning thing of, I was going to work for it. And then I thought, oh, I'm leaving the disrupted side of the world, and I'm going to go work for the disruptors. We're going to be the change agents. And in many ways, they were. There were a lot of really smart, cool people who had new ideas about media there. But so that was mainly for me. It was just about my life being disrupted. There's a slightly larger aspect of it, which is that, and I write about this in the book, that in 2011, while I was at Newsweek, they had a story called "Beached White Males," and it was about and had a picture of a guy in a suit, a business guy in a suit with gray hair, face down on a beach with the waves, just like he's like dead, right? And it was not dead, like almost dead. And it was this whole story about how in the 2008 and 2009 crash and that whole thing, that the people hit hardest were men like my age, like in the 40s then, 40s, 50s, who were getting knocked out of work. They had risen to a certain level, they were getting paid pretty well, and they were all getting wiped out. That's who companies were getting rid of. And they were also finding it impossible to find new jobs, right? There was this generational thing. And I remember it at the time because I was working at Newsweek, and I remember reading it, and there was a sense of glee inside there. The people running Newsweek thought this was really kind of funny, and I remember thinking, in a way, well, maybe I'm immune to this. But then 2 years later, I became a beached white male. There I am, like 51 years old, and the other meaning of disrupted to me was that I think there's a generation of people who who began our careers still thinking that the social contract between employers and employees was the one that our parents had. Whereas like my dad went to AT&T and worked his whole career, retired with a pension. And when I began my career, we sort of had those expectations. And the people coming out, and people coming into the workforce now don't have those expectations. They have bought into a whole new view of work. But my generation got caught in the middle with the old expectations, or 20th century expectations, but we're in the 21st century. So I think there's a generational disruption happening too that's caused by the internet, caused by changes the internet has changed everything we do. So I think that has disrupted industries all over the place and caused a whole generation of people to be sort of lost. And I'm part of that lost generation.
So I want to invite you to talk about venture capitalists a little bit, and to in the remaining 1 minute, to get that started. My sense is that a lot of the people in venture capital are guys in their 40s or 50s who made it in high tech and think that they did that for a reason. But do you think it's a functional thing that we have, this venture capitalists backing all these startups? Do you think it's dysfunctional? Do you think it's driving some of the problems, helping things?
I think there's a bubble in venture capital, right? I think I don't have numbers. I should have looked these up for the book, and I should have included this, and it would be good data to have. Just the number of people who consider themselves either venture capitalists or angel investors now compared to 10 years ago. But I guess the number is way, way bigger today. There's just a lot of people who now consider themselves investors. And what I do touch on in the book is that there was this change that came in the last 2012, I think, in the Jobs Act, where they made it easier for mom and pop investors to get into syndicates and invest in startups. So you had an even bigger influx of money. The government loosened up rules so that more regular people could invest. So I do think there are a lot of people playing at being venture capitalists, and I'm not sure if that's necessarily a good thing. There was a time when venture capital was a scarce thing and the funds were fairly small and companies were going in to beg for money. Now you have a situation where there's so much money that the venture capitalists are competing to get into the deals. They're going and begging at the entrepreneur's door. And I think that doesn't sound like a recipe for good things, right? That if you have more money chasing a few deals, that's bound to drive up valuations, to have all these, suddenly the number of unicorns went from 8 to 145 in the matter of months, and it's like they can't really be that. It's got to just be this too much money. But I think another argument people would make, and it's probably sensible, is that that's how progress is made. You throw a lot of money at something, and a lot of it goes flying away and gets wasted, and then some of it sticks and makes the next Googles, right? I couldn't pretend to be an expert on it, but I do think there's a lot more venture capital now than there ever has been before. I'm not sure that's a good thing. Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you.